Siddhartha was a prince and lived the most luxurious life possible. He lived happily in a delusion of ease and comfort. Then one day, he saw people suffering due to sickness and death, and all his beliefs were shaken. From that day forward, he was not able to enjoy luxuries as before. To him, everything in the palace appeared false. The fear of sickness and death did not allow him to sleep. Siddhartha wanted to know the truth about life and why it is impermanent. Finally, one night, after his son was born, he decided, if I do not live now and search for answers, I may never go. The love I feel for my wife and son and my responsibilities as king will never allow me to look for the truth of life. On the night he was departing the palace, one thing held him back. It was Rahula, his newborn son. At the moment, pain and suffering washed through him as he departed. He renounced everything to pursue his search. After 6 years of ascetic practice, Siddhartha was enlightened under a Bodhi tree. After his enlightenment, he gave his first sermon at Deer Park near the Ganges River in India. His talk was on the Four Noble Truths. The basic doctrines which remain common to all Buddhism include the Four Noble Truths. Existence is suffering, dukkha. Suffering has a cause, namely craving and attachment. There is a cessation of suffering, which is nirvana. And there is a path to the cessation of suffering. There is a suffering. There is a cause of suffering. There is an end of suffering. There is a path for ending suffering. Please recite again with me. There is a suffering. There is a cause of suffering. There is an end of suffering. There is a path for ending suffering. The first noble truth, there is suffering. Existence is suffering. Life is suffering. All is suffering. What do you think when you hear this? Suffering. Suffering is when you bang your toe against a stone. Suffering is when you are distracted by aches in your knees and back while listening to this talk. Anyone is suffering now? Suffering is when you experience the grief of loss. Suffering is when you get frustrated in slow traffic or when there is no internet. Suffering is when you know a wonderful time won't last forever. Suffering is when you wish you were somewhere else. Is there anyone here who would like to be someplace else right now? That's suffering. Would you agree there is suffering in our lives? This is the first truth Buddha taught us. There is a suffering. There are recognizable sufferings from mild to severe, from paper cuts to natural disasters. Some sufferings are more subtle, and we don't always call these things sufferings, such as dissatisfaction, discontentment, disappointment, irritation, or uneasiness. There are physical sufferings and mental sufferings. There are sufferings from pain, change, and life circumstances. Many people new to Buddhism tune out as soon as they hear the first noble truth, life is suffering. But the Pali word dukkha also refers to anything that is temporary and conditional. Even something precious, beautiful, and enjoyable is dukkha because it will end. Related to the nature of life is the nature of self. Are we not also temporary and conditional? We can understand that life is impermanent, but are we also impermanent? The Buddha taught that before we can understand life and death, we must understand the self. Because the root cause of suffering is our self, our attachments to self. In Buddhism, there are 8 categories of universal suffering. How many? You know, there are so many numbers in Buddhism. So here you go. First, there are 4 sufferings from life transitions through birth, aging, illness, and death. There are sweet, joyful moments in our lives, but sufferings arise throughout these 4 transitions. Again, birth, aging, illness, and death. That's the first 4 sufferings. The 5th suffering is having to part from those we love. Could you repeat? Having to part from those we love. The 6th suffering is having to encounter those we dislike or even hate. The 7th suffering is being unable to obtain what we desire. Repeat. Being unable to obtain what we desire. The 8th suffering is the suffering arising from the 5 components, 5 aggregates that make up our mind and body. These 5 aggregates are form, sensations, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. form, matter, or body. Our bodies do not stay the same. Every day I have one more wrinkle and more gray hair. That's why I dyed. When we are attached too much to body image, when we are too attached to ideals of health, that is suffering. Sensations. Sensations are the feelings received from body, form our bodies. Do you like unpleasant sensations? Unpleasant sensations bring suffering. And while we enjoy pleasant sensations, they don't last. Perceptions. Everything changes. If we are too attached to ideas, values, and beliefs, perceptions can cause suffering. Impulses create suffering and karmic distress. Consciousness. In the bed of our consciousness, the seeds of mental activities are buried. When triggered, they can pop up and erupt, creating judgments and delusions. The eighth suffering is extinguished by relinquishing attachments to the five aggregates and by realizing that all five aggregates are empty. The second noble truth is there is a cause of suffering. Cause of suffering. Please take a moment to contemplate. There is a cause of suffering. What makes you suffer? Do you know the cause of your suffering? Do you? Do you?
Sometimes. Not always.
In the second noble truth teaches that the cause of suffering is craving or thirst. We continually search for something outside ourselves to make us happy. But no matter how successful we are, we never remain satisfied. The Buddha taught that this thirst grows from ignorance of the self. We go through life grabbing and grasping one thing after another to get a sense of security. We get attached not only to physical things, but also to ideas and opinions about ourselves and the world around us. Then we become frustrated when the world doesn't behave the way we think it should, and our experience does not meet our expectations. The cause of suffering is craving or thirst. The third noble truth is there is an end of suffering. There is an end of suffering. Are you sure about this? The Four Noble Truths are sometimes compared to a physician diagnosing an illness and prescribing a treatment. The first Noble Truth tells us that the illness is. The second Noble Truth tells us that the causes of illness. The third Noble Truth holds out hope for a cure. The Buddha taught that through diligent practice, we can put an end to a craving, ending the hamster wheel chase after satisfaction is enlightenment. The fourth noble truth teaches that what frees us from suffering is the eightfold path. There's another eight, eightfold path. In Buddhism, there is no particular benefit to merely believing in a doctrine. Instead, the emphasis is on living the doctrine and walking the path. Eightfold path. I'm trying to do charade here. Right view. Right thought. Very good. Oh, this is hard. Action, right conduct.
Right livelihood.
Right livelihood, right effort, yes. Yesterday, Ginger said, right digging. Okay, now, Nick, could you do charade for me? Right dedication. Right dedication. Oh, right dedication, remember. Excellent. Now, Jay, could you do right mindfulness? Right mindfulness. Right mindfulness. And then everybody, could you do right concentration? Wow. I feel very focused being around you. The Eightfold Path can be condensed into 3 main sections. Oh goodness, we don't have to memorize 8, only 3. Wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. Wisdom, right view, and right thought are the wisdom path. Wisdom, right view, is not about believing in doctrine, but in perceiving the true nature of ourselves and the world. Right view. Right thought. Right thought. Right thought is the energy and commitment one needs to be fully engaged in practice. So right thought is also understood as right intention. Ethical conduct, second. Right speech. Right action. Right livelihood. Guide the path of ethical conduct. Ethical conduct calls us to take care of, in our speech, action, and daily living so that we do not harm others. Mental discipline through right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. We develop the mental discipline to cut through delusion. All schools of Buddhism encourage seekers to meditate, meditate, meditate to achieve clarity and focus of mind. These 3 sections are called the threefold practice. The traditional Buddhist terms are samadhi, prajna, and shila. Together, samadhi, prajna, and shila. In Won Buddhism, the specific terms for threefold practice are cultivating the spirit, inquiry into human affairs and universal principles, mindful choice in action, The second head Dharma teacher in Won Buddhism, Master Chengsan, said the following about the threefold practice. The main purpose of cultivation is to remove delusive thoughts and nurture our calm, clear, true nature. The main purpose of inquiry is to hone wisdom and investigate the original source of all things. The main purpose of choice in action is to choose rightness of the middle way and to forsake wrong and unwholesome actions. Now, let's revisit the Four Noble Truths. There is a logic in the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering. That's the outcome. There is a cause of suffering. That's the cause. There is an end of suffering. That's the outcome. There is a path for ending suffering. That's cause. Do you see the causal relationship in this? Because there is a cause of suffering, for sure there is suffering. If there is no cause of suffering, there is no suffering. Because there is a path out of suffering, for sure we can end suffering. If there is no path out of suffering, there is no end of suffering. We are stuck there forever. The logic is so clear, isn't it? Then what holds us to the hamster wheel of suffering?
Desire. Ignorance.
Habit, attachment, ritual, conditioning, rest.
That's your homework. Let us now contemplate the teaching of the Heart Sutra. No suffering, no cause of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path. What does this mean? Okay, let's help each other to figure out the answer. So group together 4 or 5 people and share your wisdom and find the answer. What does this mean?